At 6 a.m., I froze on my deck, staring at 8 strangers cannonballing into my $30,000 backyard pool. HOA President Karen Whitmore, self-proclaimed neighborhood queen, lounged on my inflatable unicorn, her smug grin gleaming under the sunrise. Wet footprints snaked from my broken gate, smashed for the 4th time this month, to my custom filter choking on their hair. The air reeked of cheap sunscreen. "Just community bonding, Marcus," Karen chirped, waving like she owned my yard. Fury surged as I gripped a baggie of pool shock powder, harmless, but oh, it had turned their swim into a neon green nightmare. How did my dream pool become Karen's playground? It started 3 months ago at an HOA meeting that flipped my world upside down. One petty rule sparked this war, and I was done playing nice. What would you do if your neighbor stole your backyard? Drop your worst HOA horror below. 3 months earlier, I walked into my first HOA meeting like a lamb to slaughter. Fresh off a brutal divorce, I'd bought this Pinehurst Estates house 8 months ago with my settlement money. Phoenix suburbia stretched endlessly. 847 homes built between 2019 and 2021, each paying $285 monthly for premium community amenities. The smell of fresh asphalt lingered from ongoing construction. One thing kept me sane through 60-hour work weeks as an electrician: my backyard oasis. That saltwater pool cost $30,000, every penny of my fresh start. Custom LED lighting, imported tiles, filtration system that could handle a resort. It was my sanctuary, my proof that I'd survived my marriage's wreckage. The community center reeked of burnt coffee and bureaucratic bullshit. Folding chairs faced a plastic table where 5 board members sat like war crime judges. Desert heat made everything stick: my shirt, my patience, and my attention to the woman commanding the room, Karen Whitmore. 52, bleached hair twisted into a power bun, real estate smile that could sell swampland to tourists. She wore authority like cheap perfume, overwhelming and inescapable. Her acrylic nails tapped the table like tiny hammers. "Next item," Karen announced, laser focusing on me. "Unauthorized pool installations and safety violations." My blood chilled. Unauthorized? I had every permit, every inspection, every document filed properly. "We've received complaints about 347 Saguaro Lane." She held up photos of my pool, taken from my backyard without permission. "LED lighting systems installed without HOA architectural approval, $1,500 violation." "Wait, what?" I shot up, chair scraping concrete. "Every other house has identical lights. I bought them at Home Depot." "Those homeowners received proper approval," Karen purred. "You did not. Rules apply equally, sweetie." That word, sweetie, hit like a slap. The way she'd said electrician earlier made it sound like convicted felon. Derek, her insurance adjuster husband, nodded from the back like a loyal German shepherd. Their 3 teenagers looked bored with Mom's power theater, but Derek glowed with secondhand authority. "This is insane," I said. "I followed every city code, every safety regulation." "City codes aren't HOA codes," Karen interrupted. "Perhaps someone in the trades isn't familiar with community standards." The other board members, all Karen's real estate clients I'd later learn, bobbed like trained seals. After the meeting, I cornered her by the parking lot. Car engines hummed as other homeowners fled, headlights cutting through desert twilight. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need to understand these lighting rules." "Oh, don't stress." She juggled keys like a jailer. "I'll inspect everything personally, make sure we're all community compliant." "I'd prefer to schedule something official." "No need." "HOA emergency access provisions. I'll be by tomorrow to assess the situation." Her SUV door slammed, cutting off protests. The next evening, I came home to chaos. My gate hung twisted off its hinges, metal bent like someone had attacked it with crowbars. Pool chemicals were half empty, custom furniture soaked and rearranged, and my prize lighting had been tested so hard 3 fixtures lay shattered on concrete. A citation waited. Multiple violations identified. Pool area non-compliant. Immediate corrections required or face escalating penalties. K. Whitmore, HOA president. But the real kicker? That weekend, Karen's entire extended family moved into my backyard like conquerors. 15 people. Kids doing cannonballs. Adults grilling steaks on my deck. The sound of my pool filter choking mixed with the smell of someone else's barbecue smoke drifting through desert air. When I demanded answers, Karen floated past on my own pool raft, martini in hand. "Just ensuring community standards, Marcus, can't properly evaluate pool safety without comprehensive testing." Her laugh echoed off my fence like breaking glass. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about lighting violations or safety standards. Karen had decided she wanted access to my pool, and she'd weaponize every HOA rule in existence to steal it legally. 3 months of escalating warfare would teach me just how deep her corruption ran, and exactly how far I'd go to stop her. 2 weeks after Karen's inspection, things escalated faster than a house fire in August. I'd barely finished my morning coffee when my doorbell rang like an emergency alarm. Standing on my porch was Officer Martinez, looking uncomfortable in the desert heat, with Karen lurking behind him like a vulture waiting for roadkill. "Mr. Thompson, we've received a complaint about threatening behavior toward a neighbor," Martinez said, sweat already beading on his forehead. The morning air carried the scent of creosote and Karen's overpowering floral perfume that somehow made the heat feel stickier. Threatening behavior? I looked past him at Karen, who wore her victimized expression like a Halloween mask. What exactly am I supposed to have threatened? Karen stepped forward, clutching a tissue like a stage prop. Yesterday evening, when I was conducting my follow-up inspection, Marcus became verbally aggressive and threatened my family's safety. Follow-up inspection? My voice cracked with disbelief. You mean when you broke into my backyard again and I told you to leave my property? See? Karen pointed at me dramatically. That aggressive tone? Officer, I have witnesses who heard everything, and she did. 3 of Derek's relatives materialized from her SUV like backup dancers, all nodding solemnly about my threatening demeanor. The crunch of gravel under their feet sounded like a jury delivering a guilty verdict. Each one swore they'd heard me make vague threats about making her regret continuing the inspections. Officer Martinez looked between us, clearly wishing he'd called in sick. "Mr. Thompson, did you raise your voice or make any statements that could be interpreted as threats?" I told her to get off my property and stop using my pool without permission. If that's threatening, then yes, I'm guilty. Karen dabbed her eyes with theatrical precision. He said he'd make me regret continuing the inspections. That sounds like a threat to me. The metallic taste of injustice filled my mouth. She was twisting my words like a pretzel, and her relatives were backing her story with Academy Award performances. But as Martinez wrote up his report, something my divorce lawyer had told me echoed in my head. Document everything, Marcus. In legal disputes, the person with the best records wins. After they left, I stood in my driveway feeling like I'd been mugged in broad daylight. Karen had just played the victim card and won. But 2 could play the documentation game, and I'd learned something valuable during my divorce proceedings. Arizona's one-party consent laws meant I could record anything happening on my own property without anyone's permission. That afternoon, I drove to Best Buy and dropped $400 on security cameras. Not the cheap ones, professional-grade systems with night vision, motion detection, and cloud storage. If Karen wanted to play games, I'd make sure every move was recorded in 4K resolution. The installation took me 3 hours, running cables and mounting cameras at perfect angles to cover every inch of my backyard. The smell of hot metal from my soldering iron mixed with satisfaction as each camera came online. My phone buzzed with setup confirmations, each one feeling like loading ammunition. The very next day, my system proved its worth. At 2:47 p.m., while I was troubleshooting electrical problems at a strip mall, motion alerts started flooding my phone. Karen's entire clan had invaded again. Derek, the kids, 3 relatives, and Karen herself lounging on my deck furniture like she owned the place. But here's where things got really interesting. Around 3:15 p.m., a well-dressed couple arrived, and Karen began what looked suspiciously like a property tour. She walked them around my pool, gesturing enthusiastically while pointing out features, while the couple took notes and photos. The woman even dipped her hand in my pool water, testing the temperature like she was considering a purchase. I watched through my phone app, jaw-dropping, as Karen pointed out community amenities that were actually my private property. The couple nodded appreciatively, clearly impressed by the neighborhood pool access they thought came with whatever house Karen was selling them. The taste of realization was bitter. She wasn't just stealing my pool for family fun, she was using it to close real estate deals. That evening, I printed the screenshots and marched to Karen's front door. The images were crystal clear, her conducting unauthorized real estate business on my property, while her family treated my pool like a country club. "Funny thing, Karen," I said, spreading the photos on her doorstep. "Looks like you're using my pool to sell houses. Pretty sure that's called fraud." For the first time, her confident mask slipped. "Those are just potential buyers interested in the neighborhood amenities. My pool isn't a neighborhood amenity. It's my private property that you've been illegally accessing for commercial purposes." Her eyes narrowed, and I caught a glimpse of the real Karen underneath the suburban mom facade. You can't prove I told them anything inappropriate, Marcus. Actually, I can. I pulled out my phone and played audio from my security system. Her voice came through clearly. And of course, residents enjoy shared access to premium aquatic facilities. Very exclusive arrangement. The sound of her own words hit her like a physical blow. Karen's face went pale, then flushed red with fury. You're recording private conversations. That's illegal wiretapping. Wrong again. One-party consent state, and this is my property. Everything you say here is fair game. The knowledge felt powerful, like holding a royal flush in poker. She slammed her door so hard the windows rattled, but I'd scored the first real victory. The war was officially on, and now I had the weapons to fight back. Karen's retaliation came exactly 1 week later, and it was surgical in its precision. I was under the hood of my work truck, cursing at a stubborn alternator, when my neighbor Helen Kowalski shuffled over with a worried expression and the morning's mail. Marcus, honey, you might want to see this, she said, her arthritic fingers trembling as she handed me an official-looking envelope. The paper felt expensive, threatening, like it had been designed specifically to ruin someone's day. Inside was a notice from the City of Phoenix Code Enforcement Division. Apparently, someone had filed a complaint about unpermitted electrical work and potential safety hazards at my address. The inspection was scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m., and failure to comply would result in immediate stop work orders and fines up to $5,000. The smell of motor oil mixed with the taste of pure rage. I knew exactly who'd made this call. The next morning, Inspector Rodriguez arrived precisely at 9, clipboard in hand and bureaucratic authority radiating from his pressed khaki uniform. Behind him, like a shadow with perfectly styled hair, came Karen Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore called in concerns about potential code violations, Rodriguez explained. She mentioned extensive electrical work without proper oversight. Karen smiled that real estate smile. I'm just looking out for community safety. We can't have unlicensed work creating fire hazards for everyone. Unlicensed? The word hit like a slap. I've been a licensed electrician for 12 years. Every piece of work has been inspected and approved. For the next hour, I watched Rodriguez examine every installation. Pool lighting, outdoor outlets, upgraded service panel. All work I'd done myself, all perfectly legal. During my divorce, I'd learned that documentation saves lives in lawsuits. Every permit, every inspection certificate was organized in a thick binder I'd prepared for exactly this moment. Inspector Rodriguez, I said, producing the documentation. Here are all permits and signed inspection certificates from your department. Everything was done to NEC standards. Rodriguez flipped through the papers, his expression shifting from official suspicion to mild annoyance. Mr. Thompson, this work is completely up to code. All proper permits were pulled, all inspections passed. He turned to Karen. Ma'am, what specific violations were you reporting? Karen's confident mask started cracking like old paint. Well, there were concerns about proximity to water, and the electrical load calculations seemed... Ma'am, are you a licensed electrician? Rodriguez's tone carried barely concealed irritation. No, but I have experience in real estate and... Then you're not qualified to assess electrical code compliance. Mr. Thompson, your installation is code compliant. Mrs. Whitmore, filing false reports wastes city resources and can result in penalties. As Rodriguez drove away, Karen's facade shattered completely. This isn't over, Marcus. I know people in this city. Important people. Your documentation game won't protect you forever. Actually, it will. I pulled out my phone, which had been recording everything. And now I have you threatening to abuse your connections to harass a neighbor? But Karen's real surprise came that afternoon. Derek's pickup truck pulled into my driveway, and he climbed out wearing his insurance adjuster uniform like armor, carrying an official tablet. Marcus, I need to conduct an inspection of your pool area for liability issues, Derek announced. Insurance company requirements. Insurance inspection? I never filed a claim. Neighbor complaint triggered a review. Standard procedure. His smile matched his wife's fake charm. Won't take long. I watched him photograph everything, measuring distances, noting equipment specifications. The sound of his boots on my deck felt like an invasion. But then something clicked. Derek worked for Pinnacle Risk Management, while my coverage was through Desert Southwest Insurance. Derek, you have no authority to inspect my property. You're not even my carrier. Derek's pen stopped moving. We stared at each other across my pool deck, desert sun beating down like a spotlight on his deception. Must be some mix-up, he mumbled, backing toward his truck. But here's where Karen's plan revealed its true genius. As Derek retreated, my phone buzzed with an email from my actual insurance company. Subject line, policy review required, neighbor safety complaint filed. My heart sank. While Derek was conducting his fake inspection, Karen had simultaneously filed a real complaint with my actual carrier, claiming my pool posed neighborhood safety risks. The email detailed a mandatory inspection scheduled for next week, and failure to cooperate could result in policy cancellation. Checkmate, Karen called from her driveway, watching Derek speed away. Hope you enjoy explaining to your real insurance company why neighbors are filing safety complaints. The metallic taste of defeat filled my mouth. She'd played me perfectly. Derek's obvious fraud was just misdirection, while the real attack came from behind. Now I faced a legitimate insurance review triggered by her false complaints, and my recording of Derek meant nothing because the actual threat was completely legal. Standing in my driveway, watching Karen's triumphant smile, I realized I was dealing with someone far more cunning than I'd anticipated. This wasn't just petty HOA drama anymore. This was war, and Karen had just won a major battle. The insurance inspection hit me like a sucker punch to the wallet. My agent, a nervous guy named Steve, who always smelled like coffee and desperation, delivered the verdict over the phone while I sat in my truck during lunch break. Marcus, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Steve said, his voice tight with bureaucratic panic. The inspector found your pool area presents elevated liability risks to neighboring properties. Your premium's jumping from $1,800 to $4,000 annually, effective immediately. $4,000? I nearly choked on my sandwich. For what exactly? Attractive nuisance clause. Since neighbors are already accessing your pool without permission, the company considers it a community liability. Either you install a 6-foot privacy fence around the entire perimeter, or they'll cancel your policy. The crunch of gravel under my boots as I paced the construction site sounded like my financial security crumbling. Karen had weaponized my own insurance against me, using her family's trespassing as evidence that my pool was dangerous to the neighborhood. That evening, I found Helen Kowalski watering her desert roses, their sweet scent mixing with the smell of cooling asphalt. At 73, Helen had survived 2 husbands, 3 careers, and 40 years of Phoenix summers. More importantly, she was a retired paralegal who'd spent decades finding loopholes in legal language. Karen's really done it this time, I told her, explaining the insurance nightmare. She's got me trapped. Build a fence I can't afford or lose my homeowner's coverage. Helen stopped watering, her expression shifting to the focused intensity I remembered from my divorce when my lawyer had explained community property laws. Marcus, honey, have you actually read your HOA covenants? The original ones, not Karen's selective interpretations? I skimmed them when I bought the house. Standard stuff about lawn maintenance and architectural approvals. Bring me your paperwork tonight. All of it. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades in law offices. I learned something during my paralegal years. HOA covenants are written by lawyers who love loopholes. Karen's been playing checkers, but the game is actually chess. 3 hours later, Helen's dining room looked like a law library explosion. Documents covered every surface, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she cross-referenced covenant sections with state regulations. The texture of aged legal paper felt familiar under my fingers, reminding me of the mountain of divorce paperwork that had taught me to read the fine print. Found it, she announced, tapping a highlighted paragraph. Section 4.3 of your original covenant. Any homeowner can designate their private amenities as community accessible for shared maintenance responsibilities and reduced individual liability. Community accessible? That sounds like exactly what I don't want. Oh, but it is what you want. Helen's smile was pure legal predator. If you voluntarily designate your pool as community accessible, the HOA becomes responsible for insurance coverage, maintenance costs, and supervision. Karen's been treating it like community property anyway. Let's make it official and legal. The genius hit me like lightning. Karen had been selling my pool access to real estate clients, using it for family gatherings, treating it like her personal resort. If I legally converted it to community property, she'd lose her exclusive access and face a flood of actual neighbors demanding their share. But here's the beautiful part, Helen continued, pulling out another document. As the contributing homeowner, you retain priority scheduling privileges and can revoke community status with 30 days' notice. You'd essentially be giving Karen exactly what she's been stealing, but on your terms. The next morning, I filed the paperwork with both the HOA and my insurance company. Steve nearly wept with relief when I explained the liability would transfer to the HOA's master policy, dropping my premium back to normal rates. Karen's reaction was immediate and volcanic. She stormed over as I was installing a community pool, all residents welcome sign by my gate, her heels clicking on pavement like gunshots. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her voice carrying across 3 backyards. "Just following HOA Covenant 4.3, I replied calmly. "Since you've been treating my pool like community property, I figured I'd make it official." "You can't just declare your pool community property. This will destroy neighborhood property values." "Actually, I can. It's right there in the covenant you're supposed to enforce." I handed her the filed paperwork. "Pools open to all 847 residents starting Monday. First come, first served." Her face cycled through confusion, rage, and dawning horror. "This is insane. You're ruining everything." "Funny, I thought community amenities increase property values. At least that's what you told those clients you showed around last month." That weekend, word spread through Pinehurst Estates like wildfire. My backyard transformed into a community center grand opening. Families I'd never met splashed around, kids did cannonballs, and Karen's exclusive paradise became everybody's swimming hole. The sound of 30 people enjoying what used to be my private sanctuary mixed satisfaction with chaos. Karen stood in her backyard watching her family compete with toddlers for pool space, her expression murderous. "You realize you've destroyed this neighborhood?" she called over the fence. "No, Karen, I've shared it with the neighborhood. There's a difference." She disappeared inside, phone already pressed to her ear. Through her kitchen window, I watched her gesticulating wildly, plotting her next move. I'd won by giving her exactly what she wanted, just not how she wanted it. But something in her eyes told me this victory would only make her more desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things. Helen's discovery came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, delivered via frantic phone call that jolted me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. "Marcus, get over here right now," she whispered, her voice crackling with excitement and exhaustion. "I found something that's going to blow this whole thing wide open." I threw on clothes and stumbled across our adjoining backyards, the cool desert air carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and possibility. Helen's kitchen glowed like a war room, every surface covered with documents, coffee cups, and the detritus of obsessive investigation. "I couldn't sleep, so I kept digging into HOA financial records," she said, gesturing at her laptop screen with trembling fingers. "Public records, contractor licenses, expense reports. Marcus, Karen's been running a goddamn embezzlement scheme." The smell of stale coffee mixed with the electric tension of discovery as Helen walked me through her findings. Spreadsheets filled with highlighted entries, bank statements, copies of invoices that told a story of systematic theft spanning 3 years. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a line item that made my blood freeze. "Community pool maintenance, $47,000 paid to Desert Oasis Pool Services." 47 grand? For what? We don't have a community pool. Exactly. But guess who owns Desert Oasis Pool Services? Helen's finger traced across a business registration document. Derek Whitmore. Karen's been approving payments to her husband's company for maintaining a pool that doesn't exist. The taste of copper filled my mouth as the implications crashed over me. She's been stealing HOA funds to pay for her own pool repairs. Oh, it gets so much worse. Helen clicked through more documents, each revelation hitting like a physical blow. Landscape architecture consulting, $12,000 to Whitmore Design Solutions. That's Karen's side business. Community safety improvements, $8,000 for security enhancements that were never installed. The paper trail painted a masterpiece of corruption. Every few months, Karen would approve another payment to a company owned by her or Derek, always for services that supposedly benefited the community but actually funded their lifestyle. "But here's the piece that made me sick to my stomach," Helen said, pulling up a contractor invoice from 6 months ago. "Emergency Community Center roof repairs, $15,000. I drive past that building every day, Marcus. The roof is perfect." That money disappeared into Derek's account while residents got hit with special assessments for unexpected maintenance costs. The audacity was breathtaking. Neighbors working overtime to pay those emergency fees while Karen and Derek pocketed the money for imaginary repairs. "How much total?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Conservative estimate? $93,000 over 3 years. Could be more. Some expenses are buried so deep I can't trace them." $93,000. Stolen from neighbors who trusted Karen to manage their money responsibly. People who skipped vacations to afford HOA fees while she treated the association like her personal ATM. And here's why she targeted your pool specifically, Helen continued, her voice hardening with disgust. I found the smoking gun in Derek's company emails. He left his business account logged in at the community center computer. Quote, pool maintenance contracts are pure profit. Once we establish community access, we can bill the HOA for chemicals, cleaning, equipment upgrades. Shared amenity status gives us legal cover for any amount. The room spun as the full scope hit me. Karen hadn't just stolen my pool for family fun. She'd identified it as the centerpiece of her next major embezzlement phase. My $30,000 investment was going to become their six-figure payday. Helen, this isn't just neighbor drama anymore. This is felony embezzlement with a paper trail. She held up a flash drive, her expression grim as death. This is going to destroy them completely. But Marcus, we need to be very careful about timing. Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. The war had just escalated to criminal investigation, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I held weapons of mass destruction. The next morning, Helen's dining room transformed into a tactical command center that would have made Pentagon strategists jealous. The aroma of strong coffee mixed with the musty scent of decades-old legal books as we spread evidence across her mahogany table like generals planning D-Day. We can't just dump this on the police and hope for the best, Helen said, her arthritic fingers surprisingly steady as she organized financial documents into neat stacks. Karen's got connections throughout the city, judges, council members, real estate cronies. One avenue alone might get buried in bureaucratic quicksand. I'd learned during my divorce that documentation meant survival, but Helen was teaching me that timing meant victory. The texture of photocopied bank statements felt like ammunition under my fingertips. I called in reinforcements, Helen announced as her doorbell chimed. Linda Chen, 3 streets over. CPA with a grudge against creative accounting. Linda Chen arrived carrying a laptop bag and the focused intensity of someone who'd spent 30 years finding discrepancies in corporate ledgers. Her calculator clicked like a metronome as she reviewed Karen's fraudulent invoices, each calculation making her expression darker. These expense reports are insulting, Linda said, her voice carrying the disgust of a professional witnessing amateur hour embezzlement. No supporting documentation, no competitive bidding, no oversight whatsoever. It's like Karen was daring someone to catch her. That's what happens when you own the board, Helen replied. All 4 other members are her real estate clients. They rubber stamp everything she slides across the table. The leather of Helen's antique chair creaked under my weight as I leaned back, mind racing through possibilities. So what's our play? We've got smoking gun evidence, but Karen's got political connections that could potentially bury this. Multi-pronged attack, Linda suggested, her accounting mind naturally gravitating towards systematic destruction. Financial, legal, political, and social pressure hitting simultaneously. She can't fight wars on every front, Helen nodded, pulling out a yellow legal pad that looked like it had survived several decades of strategic planning. Phase 1. Official documentation. Linda files forensic accounting complaints with the state regulatory board. I submit evidence packages to the county attorney's office, and Marcus reports insurance fraud to Derek's licensing authority. Phase 2, Linda continued, media pressure. My cousin Robert works for Channel 12's investigative unit. HOA corruption stories drive ratings, especially when there's 6-figure theft involved. The plan was crystallizing, but gaps remained. What about immediate protection? Once we light this fuse, Karen's going to know it came from us. She's already proven she escalates when cornered. That's where Officer Martinez becomes our ace in the hole, Helen said with predatory satisfaction. I had coffee with his wife yesterday. Turns out he's been documenting every call to your address, and he's getting professionally embarrassed being Karen's personal enforcement tool. He's very interested in reviewing our evidence. Linda's calculator fell silent as she reached her final tally. Confirmed theft, $93,000. But I'm seeing expense patterns that suggest systematic fraud going back further. With access to Derek's business records, this could easily exceed $150,000. The number settled over us like desert heat. Enough money to fund small businesses, pay for college educations, or change lives completely. Instead, it had financed Karen's lifestyle, while neighbors struggled with increasing fees and special assessments. There's one more weapon we're missing, I said, remembering something from my insurance battles. Insurance companies pursue fraud with religious fervor. If we can prove Derek's company submitted false claims for non-existent work, they'll file criminal charges independently of local authorities. Helen's eyes gleamed with legal bloodlust. Separate jurisdiction, different prosecutors. Even if Karen influences local politics, federal insurance fraud charges operate in completely different courts. Over the next 3 hours, we refined our strategy with military precision. Linda would compile forensic accounting reports showing money trails. Helen would prepare legal documentation for multiple agencies. I would gather evidence of insurance fraud and unauthorized property inspections. But we need one final element, Helen said, tapping her pen against the legal pad like a conductor preparing for crescendo. Something that forces Karen into the open before she can destroy evidence or disappear. Something public and undeniable. Linda's face lit up with inspiration. The HOA's annual meeting is next Thursday. State law requires it, minimum 50% homeowner attendance. Karen has to be there, and she's legally required to present the financial report. The pieces click together like a perfect combination lock. We ambush her at her own meeting, present evidence publicly, with media present in front of the entire neighborhood. She'll walk right into the trap, Helen agreed. Karen's so confident in her control that she won't see it coming until it's too late. But insurance mattered. During lunch break, I stopped at the hardware store for something I'd been considering, pool shock powder. Completely harmless to humans, but it turns chlorinated water neon green when mixed properly. Not for revenge, but for distraction. If Karen tried destroying evidence during our confrontation, a glowing pool would draw every eye and camera in the neighborhood. Sometimes the best tactical advantage is ensuring everyone's watching when you deliver the killing blow. Thursday was 6 days away. 6 days to prepare for total war. Karen's desperation revealed itself on Monday morning when I discovered my pool pump housing cracked open like an eggshell, electrical connections severed with surgical precision. The acrid smell of burnt wiring mixed with chlorinated water as I crouched beside $30,000 of sabotaged equipment, the desert morning air already shimmering with heat. My security cameras had captured everything. At 3:17 a.m., Derek's shadowy figure had crept across my backyard carrying what looked like a crowbar and wire cutters. The footage was crystal clear, him prying open the pump housing, cutting specific electrical connections, then retreating through a hole he'd cut in my fence with bolt cutters. But this wasn't random vandalism. Derek had targeted the exact components that would cause maximum damage while appearing accidental. The pump motor was fried, the control system destroyed, and chlorinated water had flooded the electrical panel, creating a safety hazard requiring complete replacement. My phone rang before I'd finished assessing the damage. Karen's voice dripped with false sympathy like honey mixed with arsenic. "Oh, Marcus, I heard about your pool equipment failure. What a terrible accident. Derek mentioned he could handle the repairs through his company. Emergency rates, of course, but we'd take care of you. The audacity was breathtaking. Sabotage my equipment, then offer to fix it at premium prices using HOA funds. The metallic taste of rage filled my mouth. Thanks, but I'll handle my own repairs." "Are you sure?" Derek says the damage looks extensive, could be very expensive for someone on a tradesman's budget. That familiar condescension crept into her voice like smoke under a door. "I'm sure." I hung up and immediately called Officer Martinez. 20 minutes later, Martinez stood in my backyard reviewing security footage on my phone, his expression growing darker with each replay. The crunch of gravel under his boots matched the grinding of my teeth as we watched Derek's criminal performance. "This is clear-cut vandalism and trespassing," Martinez said, making notes in his official pad. "Problem is, Derek's going to claim he was investigating a safety hazard. His insurance credentials give him some legal cover. Even at 3 a.m? Even cutting through my fence? His lawyer will argue emergency response. Without proof of criminal intent, this becomes he said, she said. Martinez pocketed his pen with obvious frustration. But keep recording. People this brazen usually hang themselves eventually. That hanging came sooner than expected. Wednesday evening, I was reviewing the week's security footage when I spotted something that made my blood freeze. Derek hadn't just sabotaged my pool. He'd returned the next day to document his own handiwork for insurance fraud. Tuesday's footage showed him back in daylight, photographing the destroyed equipment from multiple angles, measuring water damage, filling out official-looking paperwork. But the smoking gun came when I zoomed in on those forms. Property damage assessment, Pinnacle Risk Management. Derek was filing a fraudulent insurance claim with his own company for damage he'd caused himself. The beautiful irony was that his thoroughness had created perfect evidence of premeditated fraud. His photos showed the deliberately cut wiring, his measurements documented the sabotage, and his forms proved the false claim. But Karen's real masterstroke came Thursday morning with a knock that made my stomach drop. A middle-aged woman in a county health department uniform stood on my porch, carrying official-looking documentation. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Inspector Williams. We've received reports about pool chemical contamination affecting neighborhood groundwater. Need to conduct an immediate inspection." Every instinct screamed danger. Karen had already tried fake insurance inspections through Derek. Now she was escalating to impersonating government officials. "I'll need to see identification and verify this inspection with your department," I said, remembering hard-learned lessons about documentation. Inspector Williams handed over what looked like legitimate county ID and inspection orders. But something felt wrong. Her uniform was slightly off-brand, and she kept glancing toward Karen's house like she was waiting for signals. I dialed the county health department while she waited. "Yes, I need to verify an inspection team at my address." "No inspection scheduled? No Inspector Williams on staff? Thank you." The fake inspector was already retreating toward her unmarked sedan when I finished the call, but my cameras had captured everything. Her face, license plate, and the nervous glances toward Karen's house that proved coordination. That evening, Helen and I sat in her kitchen, reviewing the week's evidence while coffee percolated in the background, its rich aroma mixing with the satisfaction of building an ironclad case. "They're in full panic mode," Helen observed, studying photos of the sabotaged equipment. "Fake inspectors, equipment destruction, insurance fraud. They're committing new felonies to cover old ones." "Tomorrow's the annual meeting," I said, feeling the weight of 6 days' preparation settling on my shoulders like armor. "Either we end this or they escalate to something even worse." Helen's expression hardened with determination. "Marcus, honey, cornered animals are most dangerous, but they're also most desperate. And desperate people make fatal mistakes." The taste of impending victory mixed with the fear of what Karen might try as a final gambit. In less than 24 hours, this war would finally end, one way or another. The morning of the annual meeting, I woke to chaos. My phone exploded with emergency alerts starting at 5:47 a.m. Motion detectors triggered, security cameras going offline one by one, and the sound of breaking glass echoing from my backyard like a war zone. I rushed outside to find my pool transformed into a crime scene. Someone had shattered 3 underwater lights, dumped what smelled like motor oil across the surface, and spray-painted "community hazard" in blood-red letters across my deck. The acrid stench of vandalism mixed with chlorine fumes, creating a nauseating cocktail that made my eyes water. But the real gut punch came when I checked my security system. Every camera had been systematically disabled with paintball guns, bright orange paint obscuring the lenses like deliberate blindfolds. Whoever did this knew exactly where each camera was positioned. My phone rang before I'd finished surveying the destruction. Karen's voice carried mock concern that felt like ice water in my veins. "Marcus, I'm so sorry about the vandalism. Some neighbors are saying it's retaliation for forcing community pool access. Maybe tonight's meeting isn't the best time to discuss controversial policies." The manipulation was transparent as glass. "Destroy my evidence, then suggest postponing the meeting where I plan to expose her crimes." The metallic taste of rage filled my mouth. "Nice try, Karen. The meeting's happening as scheduled." "Are you sure? The community's very upset. Some people are saying you brought this on yourself by being so confrontational with longtime residents." I hung up and immediately called Helen. Her voice cracked with alarm when she answered. "Marcus, we have a massive problem. Someone broke into Linda's house last night and stole her laptop with all the financial analysis." The world tilted sideways. "They got everything?" "Worse, they left a threatening note. Drop the accusations or face real consequences." Linda's terrified, Marcus. "She's pulling out of tonight's meeting completely. The timing was surgical. Disable my cameras, destroy Linda's evidence, intimidate our key witness, all less than 12 hours before the confrontation." Karen wasn't just desperate. She was operating like a professional criminal. "They're trying to isolate us," I said, pacing my destroyed deck. "Make us look like lone troublemakers without credible support." "There's something else." Helen's voice dropped to a whisper. "I drove past the community center an hour ago. Karen's people are already there setting up, and Marcus, I counted 4 news vans in the parking lot." My stomach clenched like a fist. "News vans? We weren't calling media until this afternoon. That's what terrifies me. Karen's planning something massive for tonight, and she's making sure it's televised. The pieces assembled like a jigsaw puzzle from hell. Karen wasn't just trying to survive tonight's meeting. She was preparing to destroy me publicly. With my cameras disabled and Linda's evidence stolen, it would be my word against hers in front of cameras and the entire neighborhood. At 4 p.m., Officer Martinez called with news that made my blood freeze solid. "Marcus, we ran fingerprints from your gate. Got hits on Derek, but there's something else. Karen filed an emergency restraining order against you this morning. A restraining order? Based on what? Photos of you stalking her property, recordings of threatening phone calls, witness statements about aggressive behavior toward families with children. The judge granted temporary protection pending tonight's hearing. The trap snapped shut with mechanical precision. Karen had manufactured evidence of harassment, disabled my ability to prove innocence, and now I'd be walking into tonight's meeting legally prohibited from approaching her. Any attempt to present evidence would look like violating a court order. Martinez, this is completely fabricated. She's framing me for tonight. I believe you, but my hands are tied until you can prove it. Just be extremely careful. Karen's playing for keeps, and she's got the legal system backing her version. That evening, I stood in my vandalized backyard holding bags of pool shock powder while desert sunset painted the sky the color of dried blood. The smell of motor oil still contaminated my pool, and broken glass sparkled on my deck like malicious diamonds. Helen appeared at my fence, her expression carrying the weight of bad news. Linda's not coming. The break-in destroyed her completely. And Marcus, 3 other neighbors who promised to support us, got identical threatening notes. They're all staying home. The isolation was mathematically complete. No cameras, no financial evidence, no witnesses, and a restraining order that painted me as the aggressor. Karen had systematically demolished my credibility while positioning herself as an innocent victim under siege. Helen, we're walking into a public execution. I know. She climbed through the hole in my fence, her determination unwavering despite everything. But honey, sometimes you have to walk through hell to reach heaven. And I've got one surprise Karen doesn't know about. She pulled out a small recording device and smiled like a predator. Robert Kim didn't just agree to cover tonight's story. He's been investigating Karen independently for 3 months. She thinks she's ambushing us, but tonight, she's walking into her own trap. The final battle was 90 minutes away. The community center buzzed with nervous energy as I arrived at 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the meeting's scheduled start. The parking lot overflowed with cars, news vans lined the street like military vehicles, and the smell of anticipation mixed with desert evening air that carried hints of creosote and impending storm. Karen had transformed the meeting space into her personal courtroom. She sat at the head table wearing a navy business suit that screamed authority, flanked by her 4 board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Behind her, Derek lurked in the shadows with 3 men I didn't recognize, probably lawyers or security. The audience filled every folding chair and spilled into standing room along the walls. I spotted familiar faces from the neighborhood mixed with strangers who were clearly media personnel. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically around the room, their red recording lights creating an atmosphere of theatrical tension. Helen squeezed my arm as we found seats in the back row. Remember, let her dig her own grave first. Robert's got everything he needs, but the more she lies publicly, the deeper the hole gets. Karen called the meeting to order with theatrical precision, her voice carrying across the packed room with practiced authority. Good evening, everyone. Before we begin tonight's regular business, I need to address some serious concerns that have come to my attention. She gestured toward me with the expression of someone discussing a dangerous animal. Over the past several months, one resident has been making increasingly aggressive and unfounded accusations against this board and our community. Tonight, I feel it's important that everyone hear the truth. The room's attention turned toward me like a spotlight, and I felt the weight of every stare. Karen had perfectly positioned this as her word against mine, with legal documentation supporting her version of events. Mr. Thompson has been stalking my family, making threatening phone calls, and attempting to use his pool access controversy to deflect from his own inappropriate behavior. Karen's voice carried the perfect balance of hurt and determination. The courts have already issued a restraining order for our protection. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Without Linda's financial evidence or my security footage, this looked exactly like what Karen wanted, a troubled neighbor making wild accusations against respected community leaders. Karen continued her performance masterfully. Tonight, I'm asking this community to stand together against harassment and intimidation. We cannot allow— Excuse me, Mrs. Whitmore. A voice from the back cut through her speech like a knife. Robert Kim, Channel 12 investigative reporter, stood up with a microphone and camera crew. I have some questions about the financial irregularities you mentioned. Karen's confident mask flickered for just a moment. Financial irregularities? I'm not sure what you mean. The $93,000 in unauthorized payments to companies owned by you and your husband over the past 3 years. Robert's voice carried the authority of someone who'd done his homework. "Would you like to comment on those before we continue?" The room erupted. Neighbors turned to each other with shocked expressions. Camera crews swiveled toward Karen, and the sound of whispered conversations created a buzz like angry hornets. Karen's face went white, then flushed red with panic. "I don't know what kind of false information you've received, but these are public records, Mrs. Whitmore. HOA financial filings, contractor licenses, bank deposits." Robert produced a thick folder from his briefcase. Desert Oasis Pool Services, Whitmore Design Solutions, multiple invoices for services never rendered. Derek stepped forward from the shadows, his face a mask of desperate aggression. "This is harassment. You can't just make accusations without proof." That's when Helen stood up, moving with the dignity of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. "Actually, we can prove everything." She held up a flash drive that caught the camera lights like a diamond. 3 years of fraudulent invoices, email correspondence planning the embezzlement, and video evidence of property destruction. The room fell silent except for the hum of camera equipment and the distant sound of traffic outside. Karen looked like a deer caught in headlights, her political composure crumbling in real time, but I wasn't done. Standing up slowly, I pulled out my phone and the bags of pool shock powder I'd been carrying. "Karen, you've been stealing from this community for 3 years, using my pool as cover for your next phase of embezzlement and terrorizing anyone who tried to stop you." I walked toward the front of the room, restraining order be damned. "But here's the thing about bullies. They're only powerful when people are afraid to fight back." Karen's voice cracked with desperation. "He's violating a restraining order. Someone call the police." "The police are already here," Officer Martinez announced from the doorway, badge clearly visible. "And Mrs. Whitmore, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and filing false police reports." The room exploded into chaos as Derek bolted for the exit, only to run directly into 2 more officers who'd been waiting outside. Camera crews captured everything: Karen's arrest, Derek's desperate flight, and the community's shocked reaction to 3 years of systematic theft. As handcuffs clicked around Karen's wrists, I opened the pool shock powder and dumped it into the water bottle I'd been carrying. The liquid turned brilliant neon green, visible to every camera in the room. "Sometimes," I said into the nearest microphone, "you have to add a little color to make people see the truth." 6 months later, I stood in my backyard watching sunrise paint my rebuilt pool deck in shades of gold and amber. The smell of fresh cedar mixed with blooming desert marigolds as neighbors gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony of our new community center pool, funded entirely by Karen and Derek's restitution payments. The legal aftermath had been swift and merciless. Karen pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud, receiving 3 years in state prison plus $127,000 in restitution. The final tally after investigators uncovered additional hidden expenses. Derek lost his insurance license permanently and faced federal charges for mail fraud. Their house sold within a month. The new owners, a young family with 3 kids, had already become beloved neighbors who understood revolutionary concepts like asking permission and respecting boundaries. Helen Kowalski, now HOA president, had transformed our association from Karen's personal bank account into an actual democracy. The sound of her gavel opening our first transparent budget meeting still gave me chills. Over 200 residents attended, and our fees dropped 30% after eliminating phantom expenses. "Marcus, you ready?" Helen called from my patio, arranging ceremonial scissors that glinted in morning sunlight. At 73, she'd found new purpose leading our community, her legal expertise finally serving people who deserved it. Linda Chen had returned from exile to become our treasurer, implementing financial controls that made embezzlement impossible. Her forensic accounting skills now protected the community instead of hiding from it, and her mandatory annual audits kept everyone honest. Officer Martinez stood near the new pool with his family, the desert air carrying the scent of chlorine and possibility. The community had voted to name our facility the Martinez Family Community Center, honoring his integrity throughout our ordeal. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, looking over faces that had become genuine friends instead of suspicious strangers. 6 months ago, this community was being robbed by people we trusted. Today, we're celebrating what's possible when neighbors fight together instead of alone. Applause echoed off surrounding houses, mixing with children already splashing in the new community pool built with Karen's stolen money. The irony was perfect. Her embezzlement had accidentally funded the amenities she'd pretended to maintain. Robert Kim's investigative series won a regional journalism award and sparked HOA reform legislation throughout Arizona. His follow-ups exposed similar corruption in 12 other communities, leading to criminal charges and millions in recovered funds. But the real victory was personal. My restored pool had become the neighborhood's informal gathering spot for evening barbecues and weekend socializing. The community pool served larger events, but my backyard remained the heart of friendships forged through shared struggle. This center represents more than facilities, I continued, gesturing toward the building that rose from corruption's ashes. It represents what happens when people refuse to accept injustice, when neighbors support each other, and when transparency replaces corruption. Helen stepped forward to cut the ribbon, her smile carrying satisfaction of battles won and communities healed. The scissors sliced through red tape, literally and symbolically, as cameras captured the moment for local news. As families streamed into the new facility, children's laughter mixing with the splash of clean water and the crunch of happy footsteps on fresh concrete, I remembered that morning 6 months ago when I'd held pool shock powder, desperate for any way to make people pay attention. Now, watching kids do cannonballs in a pool funded by justice, I realized sometimes the best revenge isn't turning the water green, it's building something beautiful from the wreckage of what was destroyed. My phone buzzed with notifications from Robert's follow-up story. Comments poured in from communities across the country finding courage to fight their own Karens. The ripple effect was spreading, one neighborhood at a time. The most important lesson, I said to Helen as we watched families enjoy their new community space, corruption depends on silence, but justice thrives in sunlight. She nodded, then pulled out her own phone to document the celebration. And sometimes, honey, you have to be willing to make a little noise to let the light in. The taste of victory was sweeter than I'd imagined. Not bitter revenge, but the satisfaction of a community reborn from the ashes of its own corruption. Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments below and let the HOA Stories community know they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe to HOA Stories for more David vs. Goliath justice content. Ring that notification bell. Next week, we're exposing a parking enforcement scam that'll make your blood boil.